Hello, welcome back to Off Picture Discussions. My name's John Capone. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Ryan David. Ryan is a writer, director, producer. His most recent film, Future Days, released on Apple TV and Prime Video this past year. I recently connected with Ryan and we met up and found we had similar sensibilities and a like-minded perspective on filmmaking and cinema. So I thought it would be cool to do this discussion to talk about Ryan's path into filmmaking, some of the ideas he's interested in as a director and as a writer, and it's just a really cool discussion. I really enjoyed it, so I hope you do too. Thank you for watching. Okay, I am here with Ryan David. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. I thought it was very fortuitous how we came to connect and start a discussion about film, about projects, and just a little background on what I'm doing here. It's a podcast, but I view it as a diary, mostly between projects. That's why I call it Off Picture. Between the films that we make is basically checking in with filmmakers, whether I have a prior existing friendship with them or an acquaintance or don't even know them at all, just trying to sync up in this ever expanding timeline of cinema and the history of cinema and art and just connecting, and talking about the form, really, where it's been, where it's going, and what our place is in that form. So how I like to start is asking the simple question, how did you find this medium, the medium of film? Was it early on, maybe being a kid watching certain movies, maybe it's as simple as Disney movies or Star Wars. But what attracted you to the medium? And what was that sort of initial impulse out of innocence? And then, how did it really stick with you and develop, in your soul, really, to pursue this as a passion?
Cool. Yeah. It's pretty easy for me. I remember my parents taking me, it's like one of my earliest memories, to see The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. And the opening, I was like 7 years old. I think it was 93. I think, yeah. So I'm 86.
Something like that.
And that movie really scared me because in the beginning there's a terrible murder. And like we had break-ins in our street in our neighborhood around that time. And so I felt like the one-armed man was going to get me. And so my parents had to explain to me that there's a director and like Harrison Ford is playing this part. And like as soon as I realized that there was this like whole world you created, that was like it for me. I have siblings, but they're much older, so I was kind of raised alone. And I was always just playing with toys and my He-Man and my GI Joes and stuff. And so like when I learned you could like do this as like a thing, that was it. And then we moved around a lot as a kid. And so, the videotapes became like my babysitters because I was the youngest. So my parents would just, give them 2 tapes and a pizza. And like at that time, people, that was like how they, they would go out and do stuff. So I was kind of, if the 80s like was like Tarantino and Paul Thomas Anderson, they grew up on like videotapes. So did I, but like of the 80s and 90s. So it's like I was a film brought of that VHS generation, but like through Blockbuster. So while they were in their 20s, I was in my 10, 9, 10, 11. So that's kind of the thing.
That's kind of the beginning of it. Yeah. I mean, I talk to writer directors on this podcast, and it's somewhat of a similar answer of like the world building. People are taken in with the idea of a director once they realize it's not real, which is like an interesting process unto itself. I think that's unique about cinema is we hook in empathically, and when the image drops and the curtains close, we somehow take that experience and kind of extrapolate it to our own lives. What you're saying about break-ins, the immediate question for someone who follows this path is like, well, how do I do if it's not real? Like, how do I create that experience? And I mean, do you think it really was like you were? I mean, I have somewhat of a similar story. It's like I spent a lot of alone time with Legos and GI Joe characters, sitting in a room and imagining, the question, what if, right? It is like not just filmmaking, but art in general. The question of possibility.
Well, I studied psychology and philosophy in college. And
I wanted to ask you about this. We didn't talk about this the first time we met, but
I didn't really study filmmaking, funnily enough. I mean, like I took a lot of film courses on the side. My dad like would not allow me to go to film school, and honestly, like thank God. But it was also just, it was like social media. Like I had lived in Avon, Colorado, which is like outside of Vail. So we had a
Okay.
Pizza Hut. We didn't even have Blockbuster. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just like social media at that time when you're in a fucking piss shit small town. Like you wanted to see the world. And the funny
Yeah.
part was I would like be in populated areas and the non-populated areas. So that was a really weird dichotomy of being the city mouse and the country mouse. And when I
Mm.
go out to the country, knew the city was going on, but your local entertainment was the local Walmart. I
Hmm.
remember I couldn't get like the WWE wrestling game, like WCW Nitro, like when it came out on 64. I was like so pissed because you could get it in whatever, but I was stuck in Colorado. So it was just, it's funny. Like I didn't get into like serious, like talk about like the later on, talk about the Brutalist, but I didn't get into like serious film stuff until I got to college or later because I
Yeah.
grew up in middle America. So I was kind of more
Yeah.
of a movie popcorn guy, but I loved it. I loved like my favorite movie in high school was Bad Boys just
Right.
because I
Right.
thought it was just like the perfect combination. The first one was like Michael Bay's best movie, and I still think it's like an underrated classic. And I'd like watch it with girls to like hook up with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was like a movie that girls could
Classic
like
cover.
yeah, they like kind of watch it. I see it a million times. I knew the lines. And I
Yeah.
couldn't even hook up with the girl. I was like satisfied to watch the whole thing again if she was like too prude. So it was just
Can't
like
lose. Can't
yeah,
lose.
the can't lose movie, and it didn't matter how many times I saw it. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it wasn't until like I started making movie. I started like fucking around with it like my junior year, senior year of high school because I knew I
Hmm.
wanted to go to NYU.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Atlanta was just like really tough, and I just wasn't a fit vibe wise for me. I moved there from Florida, so yeah, I was like fucking around. I had a really good like one of those like teachers that was what was that movie? Those Dead Poet Society type teachers like my
Mm.
year who
Hmm.
got me like Walt Whitman and
Gave you
so
the bug.
yeah, but like what about literature and stuff? So it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
and like just being a poet, and then
Yep.
I studied philosophy and neuroscience, and like that really was like my thing because I had taken this like heroic dose of mushrooms, which
Mm.
is like Future Days has that, and I was like
Yep.
18, and it was like totally like oh, there's a whole nother world because I was kind of like an atheist, and I mean I still
Yeah.
don't know, but like I didn't understand like the unconscious, and so I
Right.
kind of got into like really into Carl Jung and stuff, and
Mm.
oddly enough, I was like really thinking about going down that path of like academia because I just really, really like absorbed it. And then this one philosopher whose name is Wittgenstein, the Coen brothers, I think one of them was like studied him.
Okay.
He was the philosopher that was just like all of philosophy is just language and language is poetry. You can deconstruct it. And
Yeah.
so don't be a philosopher, be a poet. I was like, oh fuck
Hmm.
yeah. So like they freed me of it. But what's cool is that I think like this movie that I made is very much in the philosophical. It's more of a philosophical treatise. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Very much so.
entertainment. It's not
Yep.
quite a movie, if you will. It's more of a one an hour mic excuse me, an hour comedy special, but in this interesting way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I was like taking my love of those things and then kind of making it entertaining. My love for film. I think my first film was a little bit less philosophical, and I don't know if I'll ever do it again, but kind of had an itch to scratch.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question since you brought that up, and I didn't know that, but that's I think important information because is psychedelics and psilocybin particularly is such a potent formative experience. Um, I don't know, I didn't do it as early on as you did at 18, but
Yeah.
I'll ask you a philosophical question. Do you think that that experience set you on a path that if you hadn't had that moment so early on, maybe you wouldn't be kind of down this tributary of who Ryan
Oh,
is.
yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I think I
Yeah.
went a little too woo because I started doing a lot of like ayahuasca and DMT, and I think I was trying to capture that experience in this, but I
Right.
was
Right.
trying to capture it in a way that so many people go and they get caught up in like the cult like aspect of it. I'm like, but what if
Yeah.
we take like the quantum physics and the like mind melding and kind of
Yeah.
your different version of it and apply to like a real life relationship? So it's like, what's
Right.
the practical, what's the emotional takeaway from these types of things?
The
Because sometimes
depth, the internal depth versus like the external
or you'll go on the thing
satisfaction.
and you'll like meet a lot of people that are like on it with you, and then you come back and your dad's like, "What are you talking about?" Your girlfriend's like, "What are you talking about?" And so it's like,
Doesn't quite translate. Yeah.
yeah, that was like what the movie's about. It's like you might have had
Yeah.
this cool experience, but everybody else hasn't. And then how do you
Right.
integrate into that?
Right. Right.
And it's a lot of like I like to say it's about Nietzsche and it's about DMT. And
Okay.
the
Yeah.
thing is
Yeah.
like there's this idea in Nietzsche about the eternal return. And the
Hmm.
question is, right, and this is the question at the end of the movie, is If your life is a
T.S. Eliot has a great poem about that too, the four quartets, the
Yeah, I
return.
love that.
Yeah,
But the idea is this: is if your life is happening eternally into
right,
perpetuity,
yeah,
are you living the life you want to be living? Because it could be going on and looping forever. And if
right.
it's not the life you want to be living, why not? And what are you doing about it?
Wakes people up really quick, that one, huh?
Yeah, so that's what Future Days is about, And I
Yeah,
was like, but you can't make that as a genre film for Hollywood. And so it was definitely, making this film was a real labor of love because first of all, everybody says you can't make it. And then while you're making it, everybody's trying to stop you from making it. And then
yeah,
when it
yeah,
comes out, everybody's like, what do we do with this? So it was a lesson that sets up like the next things because it's the thing I told you when I die, probably the one I'm most proud of because it's the one that will have been the hardest to do because it's just purely this philosophical poem to myself.
yeah. And that's a very Jungian perspective too. It's like the things that produce the most meaning require the most suffering, or the most laboring, or the most resistance, or the
Mhm.
the weight of the world, the inertia against that sort of thrust, right?
And when you're making it, you're like, oh, but like, did you understand how genius this is? It's like you think you're going to get all green lights, and then when you get all red lights,
Yeah.
you're like, oh my goodness gracious, can I get one green light?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I think we need more champions in the positions of power, leadership, or executive leadership in the film industry to understand. I think the film industry is in a place right now where the upper management just has no clue what to. They don't have taste, so they don't have an
Yeah,
idea of how to arbit, taste versus stuff that is just, I don't know, not, let's call it not cinema, right? Cinema, non-cinema, and it just becomes a question of, okay, if you're in a position of leadership, kind of going in a political direction too, you have a responsibility to understand what the raw material is in front of you in terms of people, in terms of artists, in terms of stories. I mean, I think it's a huge responsibility, and it's it's just sad that films like yours can't get more recognition in the inception phase
yeah.
of in the
Of course.
development phase.
Well, it's funny. That's what the Brutalist is about, right? The Brutalist is about how
Yeah,
brutal it is. But that's almost like
right.
my criticism of the movie, right? It's funny because it's like nobody understands his pain more than I did because it took me 7 years. But
Yeah.
I almost like fundamentally disagree with the movie because the entire thing is like it sucks to be an NFL quarterback. I get concussions and the owners are terrible. It's like, well, then don't play fucking quarterback, bro.
Yeah, 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 exactly,
So
exactly.
that's what you signed up for,
Right, you got to meet the world where it is, not where you want it to be, right?
And it's like I
Yeah,
think that it's like that's the tricky part. It's you're in the drug business. The drug deals are going to go bad.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
hear that, and I agree with you. But I think that some of these people do have tastes. I think we kind of
yeah.
talked about it before. I think it got to a point where movie business has always been a middle class industry,
Mm-hmm.
at that time when like Entourage was coming out and like all these things sort of happening, agents got bigger and bigger and bigger. They were jealous of the money the finance bros were making and the money the tech bros were making. So the
Right,
best thing that they could do when the corporations got really big was like, okay, we're gonna make a global product that fits everybody's thing instead of just making American and then America just outsources it. So now we're
right,
making a global product because we have to make $1 billion because how else do I justify competing with Tesla or fucking Netflix?
right,
And then it's
right.
like at that point, everything gets more expensive in LA. So these people now are like 45, 50, they got spending problems, right? Everybody's got a habit in LA and it's called spending. Like they got a kid at Harvard Westlake, two Teslas. Like they
Yeah.
can't like they might love films, but they now have a family that they can't afford. And so, it's like show me
Yeah,
an
they had to make that deal. There's a great book on this called The Big Picture, which
yeah.
describes this time in Hollywood when it was like around Marvel too. It was like the comic book and the tech influence really forced the hand of that
And,
traditional
and your
Hollywood
wife,
to
wants to go get plastic surgery, and you got a kid that's going,
yeah,
and like
the whole
you
downstream effect.
can't help John and Ryan because you got to help your fucking wife fucking pay for her shit. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
I get what happened, and it's just I think
yeah,
to your point, it's kind of like the Yankees. It's like guys, you like pay for like the big, you got to pay the big things, but if you don't have a farm system, then you're always going to have to pay up the nose, and then
yeah.
that's
And
kind
you're
of
at the risk of losing Juan Soto, which is exactly what
but
happened.
also it's like look what happened like Bradley. I love what's his name, Bradley Cooper, right? But like Netflix took a bath on the fucking on the movie that he did last year about
Yeah,
the
Maestro.
art
Yeah,
scene, you know,
yeah,
and it's like
yeah,
a beautiful movie, but you know, basically like they paid Juan Soto to like, you know, that's what that was. So you
yeah,
can take those swings, but like have, you know, do both at the same time. Like
yeah,
both
yeah.
things can happen. It's not an either or. I think
It's
that
an
was
ecosystem. It's a whole
yeah,
ecosystem. Yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
And
Yep.
don't be like unrealistic. I think that was my problem with The Brutalist was just it was like, you know, it's like it was a stand-in for him, and the movie was all about him as the director. And I felt a lot
Right.
about it like I felt like The Revenant, like
Mm,
years
hmm.
ago, in terms of like the whole movie is the actor standing in for the director to say, "Look how good I am,"
Right. Right.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I, mean, I get it, bro, but you're supposed to like entertain us too, and I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Leave something realistic to say. If that we all got to wake up in the real world, right?
Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, it's just as much more complicated than like, you know, art should prevail. It's like I agree. Like, trust me,
Yeah.
I've fucking spent 7 years doing this, so nobody knows it better than I do. But
Yeah.
if you have a
I
good
mean,
at,
do you strive like, and maybe this is more of like a project to project based question, but do you strive for honesty, authenticity, naturalism within the style, or are you fine in terms of, I'm talking not just like the
yeah,
style of the film, but like the ideas and sort of the
yeah,
worldview behind it? Do you strive to like, I mean, not maybe not even be like preachy or didactic about it, but like we live in the real world, we're going to make like art is a reflection of the real world, so we're going to talk about reality within this conceit, right?
yeah. I mean, it's hard because I think I'm learning my style. You know, it's like you're learning as you
Yeah,
go. I think
yeah,
it's like every even like when I'm starting to pitch now, it's like complete opposite of that. But it's all the lessons I learned by being so. I'm going to be the artist, and now I'm
right,
not going all the way over here, but I'm learning how to tuck that into like the thing. So it's like
right,
I'm Trojan horsing it, but I'm super
right,
happy. But it
right.
depends on like yeah, each project to me is a different. You know, I've never shot film. And I'm like, oh, this has got to be film because it's set in 1999.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
yeah, just every time there's no. I think you have to approach the project based upon like what that thing is. It's like each child. You can't
yeah,
raise each child the same and have the same. Like
right.
I'm going to raise my children this way because like, even like parents will tell you just from the DNA genetically, like right out of the box, they're different. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you just have
yeah.
to figure out like
Different needs,
yeah,
different
and I'm still kind of like
conditions.
it's like futzing out my style because like the first time I tried to be like super classical and like kind of doing my homework just like the guy did with the
Mm,
Brutalist. Like it was like this is the ultimate suck up movie of like the TA, like the PA, excuse me, the TA for the teacher. And like,
yeah.
dude, you're taking the best notes, whatever. And I'm sitting in class being like, bro, like come on, like you're such a fucking teacher's pet type of thing. I did
Yeah.
that, right? It was like I'm criticizing myself
Oh,
and my
sure. Yeah.
and people were like, you know, dude, it's like really beautiful, but like it feels like a film school student's film. And then this one was like, okay, you have these interests in these like other things. Your job as the director is to make your interests entertaining and interesting to other people.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
Right.
what my job is to think things that I'm interested in. But then each time I do it, I get better at becoming the Einstein quote of explaining it to like a 6-year-old. I think
Right.
each time I
Right.
do a movie, that's my goal is to figure out, yeah, meet them where they are.
Yeah.
But that's my job, you know, is to make
Right.
my interests your interests.
And the Picasso quote, like it took me 50 years to learn how to paint like a
Yeah,
child, right? That
yeah,
that
yeah.
whole idea, that accessibility, there's something pure and universal about simplicity. There's a sophistication in simplicity and the
It's humbling.
confidence, right? The
It's
confidence you have.
humbling because it's not
Yeah,
about you anymore. It's about and who cares if like the audience is whatever. It's like what you learn everything to unlearn it. And so it's like when you're
right,
younger, you're trying to show off how cool you are. You want to like
right.
I want to be one of the best. I want to be whatever. But it's all that ambition, which is why you should take some DMT and mushrooms.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was gonna bring it back to psilocybin. It's like we go through these phases in life where our brain is developing and we're experiencing things, and so it makes us want to label things these way at these different phases in our life. And maybe what psilocybin, DMT, these psychedelics can do is just remember that we are in that superposition, that we can play with these different phases and what we've learned, but there is some sort of superposition in which we exist, and that's what it is. A story is like a pure
Yeah.
thing outside of categories, outside of genre even.
And
There's
don't take it so
something,
seriously too. It's like have
yeah,
fun. Like I
and
think you
have
said
fun with it. Yeah.
yeah, the thing you said to me is like obviously it's a very serious, like complicated movie. But I think what I was most excited about your takeaway was that I wasn't doing it with like a wink and a nudge. I was doing it as like entertaining as possible.
Right.
And
Right.
then you were like, yeah, like you didn't like it was like these really heady, trippy things, but you weren't like lecturing there. It was like a fucking fun somehow. There was like I had somehow fun built in. I don't even know
Yeah.
how I did that. You know.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't know how you did either because it was so delicate. You were like shifting tones, but it all hung together. And maybe
Yeah.
that's just your that place of innocence or simplicity that you're directing from. You know, you have a
Yeah.
clear idea of what you're going for, and you're willing to figure it out along the way. We could talk about the film in a little bit with your production
Yeah.
experience with it, but I assume that went into it too, and just trying to get through it. And sometimes that's the best an
Yeah.
artist can do is just wake up in the morning and say, well, I don't know where the hell I am, but I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and like just trust that things are coming together, you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, like literally, I think on top of that, I had the crew. Like, it was interesting. Like my crew outside, like the production crew was outside of the artistic crew, so there's two different things, and they just
Hmm.
were not helpful. And I would just always say, like, they were young, and so because I would go off script, they were like, "You're the worst director ever," but they had never made a. They hadn't had a lot of experiences.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if it wasn't on the page, like, what do you mean you're going to shoot over there? You know, like
Right.
a Malik filmmaker. You know, like so I had I'm not blaming them. It was the wrong crew for the wrong director. But I would always say the map is not the territory. The map is not the terrain. And I think,
Right. Right.
especially younger people, like, well, these are the instructions, and it's like, okay, like, you know, but now the bullets are flying, and you
Yeah.
know, we have to
We got to be
survive.
in the moment.
Not
Yeah.
about what we decided 2 days ago, and you're thinking that I'm crazy because I'm just like, I'm like, well, this is where the river is flowing, and they're like, well, we don't understand. Why would you do that? And I'm just like, because that's done. Like, we lost that opportunity, and
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
so I'm just right now we're I would say like we're at war. Like, this is not a war, Ryan. I'm like, oh my god, it's just a friggin' metaphor. Like,
Yeah. I know. I know it.
um,
Jeez. Yeah.
yeah, geez, is right. So, but yeah, that was my thing always with this movie. Is the map is not the territory.
Cool. Well, backing up a little bit, we'll get to future days, but so in college, you said you studied psychology and philosophy?
Yeah, I studied the history of philosophy, which was interesting because it's
Okay.
more of how ideas go from one to the other, and like paradigm
Mm.
shifts happen.
Hmm.
That was really interesting. And then yeah, like I love really interested in neuroscience and psychology. So then hormonally, how our senses work. So it's all about kind of like how we process data was
Yeah.
kind of my and then it's like I liked the science version of it, right? The hard sciences, the masculine, and then I love the feminine side of it, which is like, you know, and then it's left brain, left hemisphere, right hemisphere, right?
Yeah.
So left hemisphere is spotlight with Mr. Masculine, and the right hemisphere is feminine. It's floodlight, right? So spotlight, floodlight, and that's the systems 1 and 2 of thinking fast and slow.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
always kind
Daniel
of like,
Kahneman. Yeah.
yeah, right. But it's
Yeah.
so it's like our attention. So it's like you're driving a car and you know where you're going, and I ask you what's 10 times 74. You go straight into spotlight because and then you crash because your
Yeah.
floodlights off. So
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating. I think I was in that acting program I told you about, the Meisner technique, and this was right after college. And my acting teacher was talking about the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and that's all about that supercomputer uh, second thinking, right? The unconscious, the bigger floodlight, and that got me into that rabbit hole too. And I think it was really helpful for acting and writing and directing, and the artistic process is just what we just talked about of being in the trenches, just trusting that there's an energy happening. You don't have to like sit down at your laptop and, oh, this scene's got to be perfect and I'm not going to leave my computer until this scene is perfect. It's like, no, just relax into this space, the energy of the space. Trust that you're bringing something. You don't have to think about it with this direct beam of light in your computer and create the perfect scene. Just, you got some characters, you got a situation, you got something you want to say. Just sit here and kind of let it flow, and that's the unconscious mind. That's the place where I think the real stuff comes from.
absolutely. And I think also too, it's hard. I mean, because I made another film, I think I was a little bit more cavalier. Just that, hey, we'll fix this in the editing room, or this scene might not even work. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a song, and so like we're jamming over here, and maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. So it's like let's not make everything the most precious thing in the world. And it's
Right.
like it's tightening, it's loosening, it's tightening, it's loosening. But
Yeah.
on a movie
Yeah.
set, especially with a young crew, you don't have the higher budgets of experienced people. Like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and I'm like,
Yeah, everything's a
chill.
crisis.
I'm like the Big Lebowski, and they're like basically right out of film school. What's the manual say?
Right.
And that was an interesting fit as me being the the hippie over here.
Yeah.
This movie's so weird. What the fuck?
The Tao of leadership right
Yeah,
here.
it was, so I
Yeah.
mean, it's
So in
funny.
college, go
I go,
ahead.
No,
No.
I was just saying, like, moving forward, it's like I went so loosey goosey. Like my first one, I was like this. Then I went so it's like now I think the next one it'll be like, look, I'm the boss,
Yeah, yeah.
and but I'll still have that. I know how to like free flow it and like do a lot of improv,
Yeah,
but
and empower people and know
still
how to.
we have to have this structure because
Yeah.
like like I just learned a lot by just it was not that I was too loose. I was just then I was then in competition to show them how loose you could be. So
Right,
I
right.
got locked in that battle with them. I was like, oh yeah, let me show you how like how unorganized chaos I allow this to go. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating. So when you were in school, learning these things and the whole philosophical psychological lens, you were still making films at that time, short films, just playing around?
I would because I was at Gallatin. That
Oh
was
yeah.
the school that allowed you to basically take multiple. Once you're at NYU, you're stuck in that
Okay.
whatever school you apply to. So if you went to business school, you're there. If you're College of Arts and Sciences, you're there. Tisch is Tisch. So Gallatin
Hmm.
allowed you to sample, like you create your own curriculum. So it was a lot of the movers and shakers. It's funny because it was like Rooney Mara came out of there, Donald Glover,
Oh,
um,
cool. Yeah.
the chain smokers. Yeah, just it was like Aziz Ansari. It's just like there was like that run of like 5 or 6 years of,
Yeah.
and it was I would take them during the summer. I never left New York, so I would take all the films. Yeah, you make like 5 minute films, or we would
Mhm.
shoot. We were the last class to shoot non-digital, so we shot 16 millimeter World War II cameras.
Wow.
On the scene
Cool.
back, cutting, taping my 8 minute black and white. So
That's
having to
awesome.
like take an iPod, go transfer the iPod MP3 onto tape to go
Oh
from
my God.
digital to analog, which is funny,
Wow.
and then sync that up.
Wow.
So
How crazy. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. And so that I guess coming out of school, like you were, I mean, how conscious were you of applying, this new, because you mentioned that psilocybin trip, 18 going into college, like, was this just giving you a lot of jet fuel? Like, this is what I want to talk about as a filmmaker necessarily, or it was just kind of that kind of unconscious, just sitting back
Not,
there?
not really. Sorry
Okay.
to interrupt you. No, it's just after I got going, I was kind of like working development companies. I optioned a book that was funnily enough called White Noise by Don DeLillo, which is like this huge famous book. I don't know
Love
how
that book. I read it in high school. Yeah.
I got it optioned because like Disney had let go of the option. Had found a producer in New York. She was kind of, her name was Marissa Polvino. She kind of like knew people that I had like interned with. I was able to
Hmm.
raise money through friends and family. I was just like a hustler. And I was like, well, she'll be the producer, she'll whatever. And then we kind of like had a falling out, blah, 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 blah. We lost the option. And then obviously they made the movie like 5 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Noah
But I
Baumbach.
wasn't
Yeah.
trying to direct it. I was just trying to like get the right team around, just to like be and mucking and failing and seeing what the industry was like. But I was like
Yeah.
23, so they're like, "How did you option this film, you young man?" And basically like the powers that be ripped it away from me because they're like, "You're too young to have figured this out." So I got
Yeah.
paid for it, but it was an interesting story in its own right.
Yeah.
And
That's fascinating.
so then I was just working development companies. Then I was like 27, 28. I'm like, you either got to shit or get off the pot. Like, you got to go do something. I think I
Mm.
would have started sooner, but my parents were just like, oh, like, but I just had to do it. So I kind of got a late start simply because I was just trying to make the family happy. But I showed them that I could make money with like if the film career didn't work. So I had to first prove that. Once
Yeah.
I proved that, then go do it and go drive yourself crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I've been doing for the past
Very
2 years.
cool.
Myself
Yeah,
crazy.
I'm sure that was pretty formative too, is like, going through that whole process. I mean, that was a pretty big book. I mean, it was in my high school
Yeah.
curriculum. I loved it. I love Don DeLillo's writing in general.
Yeah, I was like, my idea at the time was I was trying to get, because she knew him, Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor. That was like my
Okay,
idea, get Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor
got
because they
it.
had just done, I don't know, I loved Election. I just thought he was like the perfect
Yeah.
director for that, even over the one whoever just did it. I just thought I saw Alexander Payne was like the right bitter sarcasm of Don
Yeah.
DeLillo, whereas I don't think the guy who did it now, he's too nice. So I was just like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, that's
same,
fascinating.
and I thought like instead of at that time, my other friend I knew was a mentor of mine was really close friends with Christian Bale, and like this was before
Okay.
Christian was really this was like 13 years ago. So I thought it was like,
Yeah.
oh, Christian Bale is the professor. Amy Adams, like she had just started, like this was the inkling of this stuff. So it's like, okay, if you have this
I
book,
see it. I like
yeah,
it.
you
I
see it,
want to see the
right? So
movie.
I was just trying to like, and I was like the junior person, but I had fucking raised all the money, So
Yeah.
it was
Wow.
funny. That's how it goes.
Yeah, yeah, that is. So, your first feature film, I think you used the metaphor when we were talking about, these early films, the Formula One racing, your F3, your F2, your F1. So this would be your F1 or
No,
F3, if I'm not mistaken. What year was it? And just tell me a little bit about that project and kind of where you were artistically going into it. This would be after the development company, I
yeah,
suspect.
I had another script. It's funny that this is the project that I'm kind of doing now. I had this kind of like up all night comedy about these two kind of like My Due Date or Planes, Trains, and Automobile. And it was like about a kid coming out of college. It was called Technical Difficulties. And it was just like kind of this like, up all night type of a movie, like after hours. And I had a manager and they kept giving me rewrites on it. And I couldn't get it off the ground. And they just jerked me around. And so then I started dating this girl who was a screenwriter, and I was like madly in love with her because she was older, was like booking these big things, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be a power couple. We worked together, and she was just terrible. Like I was just me projecting onto her, and I think a lot of that relationship ended up in both Seattle Road and a little bit in Future Days. And
Mm.
so I had that relationship for 2 years, and then I wrote this film as like the my version of what was that movie? Blanking right now. It was like I was gonna okay, I can make a movie for $300,000 and get young stars in it. The movie that launched. Oh, what was the movie about the couple and then she had to go back to England? Drake something Dormeris's movie, and it was
Oh yeah, with the one with Felicity
yeah,
Jones.
that movie. So it's like that movie had just
Yeah, with the guy who died, Anton Yelich. Yeah,
so it's like he made it for 250. It
yeah,
had these stars. I'm like, oh, I can make a movie for 250 and get stars like that.
right.
I didn't realize that his mom was like one of the biggest casting agents in LA.
Mm.
That this movie was kind of like for
Nice
sure
connection.
in Sundance and all that stuff. So I then tried to pull off the same thing. Had Natasha Kinski's daughter was in the was going to be in the movie, and then what's the guy from Pulp Fiction? Not Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs. Michael Madsen, his son.
Michael
So
Madsen.
Michael Madsen and Natasha Kinski's daughter, Sonia. So you have these
Okay.
two big famous names, their children,
Hmm.
and they had the same manager, and the guy kind of like blew it up. And so like 2 weeks before shooting, I had to replace them. And yeah, it was kind. I mean, it still kind of feels like a student film. I got it out. Danny Harrison saw it and was like, "You remind me of my dad." His dad, George Harrison, of the Beatles, and so he came on as composer,
Hmm.
and that kind of like gave me some like second wind in my sails. It's like, okay, like even if you do weird abstract things that are more for you, at least people in the art community are feeling it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like we'll see where that goes. So, I got it done. Didn't go to festivals, but I got it released because of like Danny and like we made an album with it too. So it was like this really cool experience because it's kind of like this really long music video. And again, it's just me kind of like noodling around. And I think
Yeah.
it's difficult because everybody's just like, wants success right away, or like, okay, you go and do, like Fruitful Station gets you,
Right.
a Marvel movie.
Creed or yeah,
But
whatever.
yeah, I kind of took a different detour of just until I get to that level, let me just like kind of mess around to see like let me play with this type of paint. Let me play with charcoals. So I've kind of been like
Yeah.
not futzing around, but like kind of more the David Lynch approach of just I'm gonna just keep tinkering around here so that I
Yeah.
know what I'm doing when I actually get to the next thing.
Yeah.
Because I think so many directors they don't look at it like a startup. Again, art for art's sake. And I think what I've learned is to be a demon on costs. Like anytime I do another
Mm.
project, my assistant is going to be an accountant and or working with the accountant. And so I
Right.
don't have to deal with the line producer. Yeah, they can yell at me all I want, but every day I'm going to be working with the accountant so that
Yeah.
I know exactly where I am and controlling my spend and controlling your burn. Like it happens in startups all the time. So
Yep.
it's like I know where my burn is. And then if the line producer comes to me and says, you can't do this, I'm like, no, that's my choice because being a real director, it's the creative of how you spend your money. And if
Yeah.
I can be smarter than you as a line producer, I can be like, well, no. I'll screw that day over there. Let me move this thing over here. So the job of
Right.
director is to really understand where your burn is going.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
outside
something I learned too on my film as well is Neon Bleed is 250K all in budget, and I thought we were pretty focused about where we were allocating things. I mean, but the first time you do a feature film, there's so many moving parts, there's so many people, there's so many things that can go wrong, fires you have to put out where that's why there's contingency. But I mean, just the craziest stuff, right? And then like you said, there's the soft skills of like managing people, right? Like, if you don't have a great relationship with your line producer, as you alluded to, you want to have a second set of eyes on that where, at the end of the day, you're the lead producer and the buck stops with you. You have to be involved with that. And I think it is a creative, it's an aspect of the creative. I mean, it is, it's the paints, it's the amount of paint you have, it's the amount of canvas you have. It's just it's raw materials. Money is creating the raw materials that are in front of you.
That's the funny part. That's exactly right. The funny part is the higher you go and the better you get at it, the more that becomes
Right.
your job is not to
becomes
direct
automated. Yeah.
the job is not to direct the movie. By the time you're directing the movie, it's like I say, it's like a soccer game. By the time the pitch starts, as a director, it's not like football or basketball. You call timeout, whatever. Like the team that's assembled and the alchemy of those people is what makes the movie.
Yes.
So it's casting. It's
Right.
casting for all your positions,
crew, department heads,
all the creative department heads. So someone might be really good, but if you know that they're not going to fit with that person, then don't hire them, even
Right.
if they might have the best awards, whatever, because it's how do they fit with this alchemy of this team. And so the real job as the director is casting not just the film, the production team, and then getting out of their way. And then when they all come to you, it's daddy, I want to use the credit card, knowing which kid to give the credit card to.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what directing is.
Absolutely. I think Tarantino said that. He's like, my skill is in hiring people. Like, yes, he writes the film, but I mean, that's like, an author could create a story. Anyone could write a story if you're good at writing stories. But in terms of a director, it's like you just said, it's like, day one, it doesn't start on day one. The action, the real artistry, if you will, is like figuring out the energy you need to bring it together, and then making sure that you hire the people that are going to interact in such a way to create that energy, to harness that energy, right?
No one teaches you that, right? It's like, no one teaches you how to have a kid, right? So you come home that first night and like, where's the manual?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yep, got a 19-month-old. We're still learning. Every day is a learning process. Figuring out what the space needs to be for this little one to thrive. And yeah, movies are like kids, 100%, 100%. So I guess now spending a little bit of time on future days. You mentioned it was a 7-year process or a 9-year process?
Like script to like coming out 8.5 years or 8.5 years. So
wow.
COVID was in there too.
Yep.
We had a false start with casting. We got pretty close, and we had like a good casting director, and then through one of our producers, we had gotten a hard commit from Suki Waterhouse. This is again before she was Waterhouse. She just started dating Robert Pattinson, so I was like, oh my god, great, because blah blah blah. And then of course CAA blew it up because it was too small of a movie, as you've probably felt some of this stuff too. And so she was like, really, we had gone on conversations, and we knew that was going to be a problem, and so we would try to like nip it in the bud. But then because of that, the casting issue was pretty big. It was just like, you guys are too small. So then we had to start all the way back, even like further back down the thing.
And was it as simple as you told them the budget, and this is a budget thing, or just the filmmakers involved, the producers, the whole thing?
No, it wasn't the producers involved, because the producers involved were like not bad. It was just, it's an unnecessary risk. If like she's trying to get here, well, I take an unnecessary risk. But then it's funny part is that they take them all the time, because it's like then they don't do any job. They do some weird thing over there, and okay, she was in, she's a musician now.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about that? She's not an actress; she's a musician, right? It's like, how funny, it's like she was in the Dali movie for like 5 minutes, and she was great in it, So she's a musician now. So there you go. That's what they got her.
So funny. It's interesting how people make decisions. Mitigated risk, calculated risk.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a risk. No matter what, it's a risk. Going into it was, could you sense this was going to be, in terms of like the films that you ideate or have in your mind's eye? Was this like a bigger film for you? I mean, obviously it's your second feature film, but you're swinging for the fences, having watched it and enjoyed it and appreciating the scope of it emotionally, philosophically, in terms of the science fiction themes within it. It's a one of a kind film. I mean, did it always feel that way? Was that always the intention?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew it was indie, so that's why I was like, okay, well, I can do what I want, because I know it's not. But I just thought with LA being so woo woo and like me knowing the community here and all that stuff, and everybody pretending to LA to be as woo woo as they are. I was like, oh, well, everybody's gonna be like, thank God that like you made a movie like this, and I thought there would be a lot more help because of the subject matter. But I
Mm.
found fast that a lot of that woo woo community or like the yoga teachers and like all that stuff, whatever, they're not. Everybody just is waiting for instructions in LA, and
Mm.
so even if you take
Yeah.
that step out, there was less help than I thought there'd be. Brandon came to it because of that. I made the actor dropped out, but he like flipped for it.
Hmm.
Tanya like didn't quite understand it. She's not as like into that stuff anyway. That's why I think she like really helped the movie because she grounded it with
Yeah. Yeah.
give a shit about this stuff. So shut up.
Right.
I think that really
That was
helped.
a great dynamic. Yeah,
Yeah,
between the
so
leads.
it was,
Yeah.
but I knew that when I was like casting her because like Brandon and I would always like geek out about this shit and like we were
Mm.
early on mud water and all the various modalities. So I was just surprised that of all places, LA was the one city that should have been helpful to making this thing was
Mm.
the most toxic place to make this thing, which was why I kind of moved to Portugal. I was like, this is crazy. Everybody here is really
Yeah.
got their priorities crazy. Um,
Yeah.
so the issue in terms of like swinging for the fences and being bigger was simply because literally the production was very hairy, and so even I had like the script and what I got, it's like I got 70%, 60%. That always happens, but you're trying to shoot for 80% of what you want, 80 20, 70 30, and I
Hmm.
was like 40 60. And so a
Okay.
lot of the things that we didn't even get a chance to shoot or do or whatever, and so I was left with a lot of time in COVID because so I had a lot of time to shape it. So the cool
Yeah.
thing is that most edits you got to turn it around 3 6 9 months. I had a year, and then the music was delayed, and so I just was like, look, this isn't this. The connective tissue really isn't here, and a lot of some of the things that are going to really make this like mentally make sense because it's a
Mm.
very complicated movie, and if you don't have all of those steps for the magic trick, you only have like 1 2 3 and then 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to make that magic trick work. So it was like, fuck, how do we do a sleight of hand magic trick where obviously if I had everything, this could have been like really like exceptional, but it's going to have to be a card trick. And like, how do I just really get good at sleight of hand and still making, I think, building connective tissue out of just someone's mind association. So it really became what art's about. It was like, okay, like you've got to make this land somehow, some way. And like, let's just lean on the emotionality of it to
Right.
do
Right.
the heavy
Well,
lift.
that's where I think you succeeded. I mean, there's so many of those. I mean, I think of your film. When I think of it, I think of these montages. I mean, I think of some of the scenes between the actors that are very linear and just naturalistic, but then I think of some of these sequences that are more, the montage, right? The juxtaposition of images and sound and really, I think that's what cinema really is. Even if it's just a dramatic scene between two actors, I think there's ways you can massage it to elevate the form in that way and create a unique experience, and you most certainly did that with this film. I mean, and I guess the question is like how much was informed by the issues you ran into that forced you to kind of think around these problems and maybe find new insights and new avenues into shaping the picture, like you say, or how much of it was, well, I have an idea for what this sequence needs to feel like, so even though this isn't
Well,
happening, I'm
it was crazy. It was all scripted. I mean, the funny
yeah.
thing was is like
Wow.
because we had to start over again, and then
Hmm.
I had done like DMT and I was like I written the script, then I had like a year and a half of it like trying to put it together, falling apart. Then I went and did ayahuasca DMT. That
Yeah.
gave me like a new thing. Like I'm making this movie no matter what. Pushed it through, and then like everything, like we lost an actor, we lost another actor, we replaced it. It happens all the time, fine. And then, but it was like happening like almost like on set essentially, which is not always the greatest thing. And then, especially for a movie of this size, but it was just I was so prepared because I had been building it in my head for so long. So I think the false starts. I was just super prepared and I made so many different Bibles and like look here for this thing. And like I built a whole
Yeah.
like Bible to do it. And then the funny part was the production design didn't even read the Bible. Like one of the production people in the production design was like, dude, the whole thing is there. Like, would anybody just take the time to just like go like it's like you don't even need him here to make the movie. He's like, it was so I had so prepared. So
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
about just like not letting the production team torpedo it essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I apologize if you hear my dog barking. I don't know
Okay.
giving him a fit, but yeah, I think it's something where you have a very clear vision for it, and it's like you said with that, hiring department heads, it's just trying to get people who can shorthand with you and realize like how you want things executed, how you want people to contribute their natural talents, and that's why you hire them, but there's some sort of synergy that needs to happen to kind of get them moving in the direction or follow you down the path, right?
Yeah, like I mean, like to the movie's point, it's like I wouldn't change it for the world. It's like sets up everything, sets up my resilience, sets up me moving to Portugal,
Yeah,
sets up me figuring out then like the next projects. As I said, it's like I don't come out of that as bitter as Brady Gobert,
yeah,
Gobert,
yeah.
So it's like
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think the ending of the film too leaves you on a very hopeful
yeah,
note too. I mean, it's melancholic, right? I mean, it's a guy going through understanding that there's a certain sense of grieving and letting go and surrendering that this relationship requires if they're even together, or if he's letting her go, right? They're two ships passing in the night sort of idea on a cosmic, you know, perspective, but there's a sense of like wholeness achieved in a weird way.
yeah. I mean, I
There's
think
that dichotomy there.
yeah, I think that's what I mean. As an artist, that's my sweet spot. Even with my first film, I think
Mm,
bittersweet longing
yeah,
and like,
yeah,
it's just my soul, right? So I think that's the other problem with like again killing Brady. It's like, man, I don't know who you are at the end of this, man. It's like it's such
yeah.
the like perfect term paper that like who
Mm,
are you, Brady? Like I want to know who you are, you
right,
know.
right.
So it's like my sweet spot is that like bittersweet longing of like I take the part out. It's like to look at it, but then I put it back into the hole. But you're sad that the part goes back into the hole. But I
Yeah,
think, and that's
yeah.
the movies. I
That's the
remember,
magic trick. Yeah,
yeah, that's what I want to give as an artist. I never forget. It's just so stupid. The movie Little Giants, really stupid
oh yeah,
movie about like football, whatever. And I was like 8 years old, and I was like in love with the girl who's the quarterback, Icebox. And I
yeah,
never forget like being 8 years old and being like so melancholic that like she wasn't my girlfriend.
yeah, yeah. For
And
me, it was me. I think it was Free Willy. Free Willy was so sad, man.
yeah, but I
It
was
was
like
such
so
sad
sad
one.
this girl wasn't my girlfriend who was like this fictional character that was a football player,
Yeah,
football player, and I was 8 years old. So I feel like yeah, that was my soul when I was 8, and that's back to like being a kid again. That's
that pathos,
yeah, and
that
that was it
suffering.
was always just kind of like that. I was always kind of like a melancholy, nostalgic older soul. So I think that's the type of movie that I'm always going to try to make. I'm always going to have a bittersweet ending. Like if you follow my career, it'll be like, bro, you always do the same movie and it's the same thing. I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, but that's why we watch great directors. It's like
Yeah,
we want to kind of see them do the same thing, just in a new
that's
interpretation.
true.
But it's the same stuff. It's the same feelings. I mean, like I mean, me as I'm a fan of your work. I think because I connect to that very thing, that bittersweet longing, as you say, that melancholy, that pathos, that those existential questions of what it means to be a human, the human condition, and all those things. And I want to. Again, as a fan of you, I want to see you, reinterpret those themes over and over again in new ways. And I think I mean, that's cinema. I mean, that's
Yeah,
period. That's what it is for
yeah,
sure. Very cool. I mean, coming out of Future Days and the whole experience from the production side of it, the creative vision, whether you executed it how you wanted to when you started out or not. And I mean, I believe our visions evolve anyway throughout the whole process. It's what happens. What are the big takeaways for you now? I guess like yeah, coming out of it now, being through the marketing, the release, and going into the next thing. Like where are you at right now?
yeah, absolutely. But I have like two projects, right? So it's like I have I have an F1A and an F1B, if you will. So I basically was like, okay, now that I've like done this, it's so time consuming and so frustrating, and it's nobody's fault just making like small films, but you got to do them. But I'm at the point where it's like, okay, under 5 million is really tough, but it's really tough to raise that type of money. So I have like a $3.5 to $5 million film. It's kind of like a Blumhouse type of a thing. Um, it's less horror based. I mean, I don't know if even Blumhouse would go for it, but it's not A24. I'd tell you that. Uh,
Yeah,
but so I have that. I can get that off the ground in the UK. So that's exciting. It's called Alone, and it's kind of like Poltergeist meets Home Alone. And it's a
yeah.
little bit
Remember you
more
telling me that? Yeah,
interesting thing. And it's like that I know I can do no matter what in terms of I know how to push something through. And so I'm gonna just start picking up a shovel with that, and I already started. I have a screenwriter helping me. The first time I've ever had someone, but I needed someone in the UK because I'm not from there, and I
Mm.
just, we're gonna co-write it, or he's gonna write it, but story by me and story by
Yeah.
him, sort of. And yeah, I just also, it's like I don't have the bandwidth because I have two other projects that I've written that are like 7 to 10, and I still have to cook on those.
Yeah. Cool.
I needed a sous chef, and it's like, okay, cool. And it's not even a sous chef. Like he's really, it's just fun to have that collaboration for
Yeah.
someone screenwriter, especially, and he loves it because he knows that I'm a screenwriter. So it's like a
Yeah.
cool thing. And then the thing I really want to do in terms of like LA, like, okay, like you guys don't like my weird stuff. Like I've Trojan horsing this film, if you will, and it's like a $7.5 million film, and it's a crime film, but the kind of the angle in on it is that it's like a teen comedy. So it's like a John Hughes movie set in a Tarantino, Guy Ritchie
Mm.
movie early in their career. So
Mm-hmm.
the irony or the contrast of these teenagers in a rom-com experiencing a hard crime film, um, one night in Long Island in 1999. So the whole movie is really about 1999. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the
Cool.
marketing of it. It's like Coppola's being like, it's not about Vietnam, it is Vietnam. And it's
Yeah.
like not about 1999, it is 1999.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm excited because both films are period pieces. One's in the 80s and one is in the 90s. The
Yeah.
one that's alone is 80s, but it's also 2012. So it'd be mixed media. I'd be shooting film for the
Oh,
80s,
cool.
and then I'd be shooting whatever cameras were out in 2012. So
Very cool.
it's just shooting whatever that time period was, and not getting too caught up in it's got to be film, it's got to be digital. I mean,
Right.
I prefer digital because I like to shoot multicam. I like to shoot
Mm-hmm.
two cameras
Okay. Cool.
because I like the actors to kind of riff. I'm not like every word has to land,
Yeah.
especially because I'm more philosophical. So sometimes I like the actors to make it their own.
Yeah.
But if I
I
shoot,
was another question I forgot to ask you. What your process is
yeah,
working with actors and yeah,
yeah, I
the
mean,
idea of
I guess it's
improvisation.
evolving. Every project's different. Like I
Yeah.
see myself on another project being like, we're doing this word for word. It just
Yeah.
depends. Like I'm not. Again, everything is different, and so I'm excited about both of these films that would be next because one, I'd be shooting half film, half digital. That would be the one I would be doing. So I'd be learning about film because I'd
Yeah.
have to shoot it's called Heartbreakers, the 1999 film. I have to shoot that all on film, and that would be single camera. And so I've never done that before. I don't know how to work with actors like that.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
a
if you have
constraint.
actors that are the age appropriate, 18, 19, 20, and 21, 22, 23. Well, they've never acted on film. So
Right.
it's like, what's going to happen here? So that excites me.
Yeah. It's like teleportation, dropping people in a different time with different
Yeah,
tools.
so that
Right.
excites me that I've never shot on film and they've never shot on film, and like, we might have to go back, but that's why you need, proper financing from, Warner Brothers and A24.
Right.
It's like me going to them and being like, okay, like I know what you want and I know how to make my film in it because it's me telling my like childhood. So that's why I can go make that, but it's also like I like asked ChatGPT like what the movie's for, but it's like fans for Euphoria, but Baby Driver, but it's also I was like, oh, this is so good. I didn't even think about it. It's also Licorice Pizza and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
they did. But it's funny. I was really looking at Boogie Nights and Pulp Fiction,
Mm.
but I ended up writing Licorice Pizza, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but with a
Yeah.
Euphoria bent at like a Baby Driver, but like a thing. So I was
Like
like, wow,
crime. Yeah. Crime thing going on.
yeah,
Yeah, and those are fun movies. It's like the hangout movies, right? The Tarantino, PTA.
hang
Just
out.
get a group of people together and watch them kind of bounce off each other.
Hang on movie, but then at the teen comedy, I really structured it. I structured it like an old fashioned 1940s movie, like bringing
Oh,
up baby
classical. Yeah.
Catherine, like a screwball comedy. So it's
Yeah.
Catherine Hepburn and Cary Grant, and it's the like blah 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 rapid fire dialogue. So
Yep.
it has
Love
it's
it.
like that with the screwball comedy of the traditional like here's the hot guy, here's the hot girl, and I think with Future Days, I prove that I can do the guy and the
Yeah.
girl.
Yep.
So like, I'm taking
Yep.
what I learned about like a couple and like having them be hot, sexy, and cool, and then bringing that to an actual production instead of just like a theater play that was the Future Days, if you will.
Yeah. Love it. I'm excited to see both of these productions
Yeah.
mount and come together. It's yeah. Listen, I'm happy we met and glad we're continuing this conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. I love your stuff. I wish you the best of luck on these next projects. I know how tough it is. Before we go, did you want to you brought some books you
Oh
showed me?
yeah.
Do you
So
want
like
to
thinking about
talk
like
about Yeah.
Well, I think like, I mean, obviously a huge influence that I'm like just going to slowly take and fall away, but he's always still is Terrence Malick book, Magic Hours. I mean,
Yeah, and you
obviously,
said this was recently released, the
yeah,
film in
it was
life.
just recently released, and funnily enough, I was like looking at someone's Instagram. I think Sean Baker, and he was geeked out about getting it too because this is the real like official biography of
Mm,
Malick. So obviously, filmmakers check this out.
yeah,
And
that's
then
so cool.
there's this other cool book that I just found out about. It's called The Work of Art, and it's like
Yeah.
basically it's like your podcast, right? It's like how like so it's really interesting.
Process. Yeah.
The first page is Frank Gehry, the famous architect.
Oh
This
yeah.
was this is his scribble, right? Just like literally like a child scribble.
Love it.
And then how crazy is this? This becomes the building. I
Freaking
just thought that's
fascinating.
so fucking cool. Of
Is
what's
that
like,
in Barcelona?
yeah, it's in Spain somewhere,
Yeah.
and it's
I
just so cool.
recognize the spider too, yeah.
You look at that like stupid scribble,
Yep.
you know, and then one page, you know, becomes that. So it
You
just goes
got
to
it.
show you, you know, scribble stuff down. You never know.
Yep. 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 Your mind gets on something with form and just like letting the hand go. I got some idea rolling around there that wants to come to life. Super cool. All right, Ryan. Listen,
Awesome.
anything else you want to say?
That was great, man. It was so awesome. I'm so glad we connected, and yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna be doing that screen, so I'll, you know, invite you through and see if you can come, and we'll just kind of keep this conversation going.
Let's do it. Well, thanks for joining me today, and yeah, we'll have you on with the next film.
Cool. All right, thanks, man. Bye.
All right, good to see you. Bye bye.